Welcome to the Focused and Fearless podcast, the show designed to explore how you can step into powerful self-leadership and stop settling for less in your life, business, health, and wealth. I'm your host, Heather Angel, and as a certified energy practitioner, coach, and online business consultant with over a decade of experience, you can expect expansive, honest, and enlightening conversations about what it really takes to create the changes in your life and business that right now may just feel completely out of reach. Thank you for choosing to invest in yourself by listening to this episode. Without further ado, let's dive in. In today's episode, I'm talking with my very special guest, Sarah Berthon from Excel Against the Odds. When Sarah set up her first skincare business while dealing with several chronic illnesses, she quickly realized that she needed to put strategies in place to look after her health while working on the business. Now, whether you have a chronic illness or not, this is certainly something I think many of us can relate to. When we push hard on our businesses, which sometimes, we have seasons where our business takes over everything, right? We have to make sure we've got strategies in place to make sure we don't make ourselves ill, to make sure we don't head towards burnout. Now, add on to that, if you already have a chronic illness of some sort, these strategies and techniques are even more important. So, without further ado, I introduce you to Sarah Berthon. Sarah, welcome to the Focused and Fearless podcast.
Oh, thank you very much for inviting me on today.
I'm so thrilled to have you with us because although this is quite a niche topic, I feel it's actually relevant for anyone in business because although my audience aren't full of people with chronic illness, I have a lot of friends, family, and clients who have experienced chronic illness or are having to deal with it. And I just think it's so difficult when it's difficult to run a business full stop. Throw in an illness on top of that, and it becomes incredibly challenging. So I'm really thrilled that you're here and you're going to be able to share some wisdom and a few tips for my listeners to help them navigate that. And so,
yes, brilliant. I think it affects. I think running a business anyway, as you say, can be very exhausting, especially when you're running a family or looking after a house and everything else that goes on in life. So a lot of these tips will apply to everybody because it's around keeping yourself healthy when running a business.
Absolutely. And that can be one of the first things that drops off the way. It's right at the bottom of the to-do list, isn't it?
Absolutely, yes.
So before we dive into all of that, how did you get into this sort of line of coaching and supporting people?
Well, a few years ago, I started my own business. I had previously had a very successful career, which involved traveling around the world, meeting with FTSE 100 businesses and Fortune 500 businesses. And I love my career, but it wasn't compatible with my health condition. So a few years ago, I started a business where I was making natural vegan skincare and running parties for children where they could make their own skincare products as well, which was great. But as I was new to business, I spent a lot of time looking online on forums, trying to get advice. And the advice I was getting just wasn't really compatible with my illnesses because I needed to put myself first and look after my health. And then my business came second. And I knew that there would be a way to make it work. In a way that it wasn't damaging to my health, but it was trying to work that out. So I spent a long time trying to work that out. And I set up a free community, Entrepreneurs Against the Odds, for people with chronic illnesses who are running a business. And I started to get people together and share our stories and advice on how to make it work. And over the last few years, I've developed quite a few strategies and coping techniques and tips and tricks on how to run a business and to make it successful, but also looking after your health primarily, putting that at the forefront. And so I started mentoring people, and I've recently set up an academy to help other people with chronic illnesses through a series of workshops and mentoring, help them to get the most from their business, but also looking after their health.
That's so needed. And did you have the chronic illnesses when you were in your sort of high pressure career, or did they develop during that time?
So I have since found out it took a very, very long time to get diagnosed, but I've since found out that I have a condition that I would have had from birth, which then caused other conditions which developed while I was in the midst of my career. So I've got a condition called Danlos syndrome, which means that the collagen in my body is faulty. So that really affects all my joints and causes a lot of pain, often which was put down to overworking and stress, which in fact it wasn't. I then developed a condition called POTS syndrome, which stands for postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which is a bit of a mouthful. And that causes, basically when I stand up, all my blood flows to the floor and causes people to faint. So that also affects all of my autonomic nervous system. So anything that is controlled without me thinking about it. So breathing, digestion, sleeping, anything like that is affected by this condition. And I was also diagnosed with ME, so chronic fatigue syndrome, which causes the exhaustion. And that diagnosis was what led to the end of my career as it was, because I kept going as long as I could, but I was just getting worse and worse. And no matter what I tried, I just couldn't get on top of it. So in the end, I needed to have a complete break and have some time off work to really try and allow my body to start recovering. And I then discovered that working full time just wasn't going to work for me, especially if I was having to commute or travel. So yeah, that's why I ended up having to leave that career.
Wow. And I think that's a really, I mean, gosh, if the listeners don't get anything else out of the conversation, which I'm sure they will, but the fact that we so often, especially here in the West, we just so often go like, oh, it's probably this. Oh, I'm probably just a bit tired. Oh, and even when you go to the GPs, as well-meaning, as knowledgeable as they are, going, probably is stress, look at your lifestyle, blah, blah, blah. And actually, no, there was something underlying there. And I think I've seen it so many times, and I'm sure you have as well, friends, clients, where they're just going and going. Like, oh, I've had a bit of a headache. Or, oh, this has happened, blah, blah, blah. And actually, sometimes we do need to go, what is going on? This isn't actually normal. It's not normal to feel so wiped out. It's not normal to have these aches and pains and these headaches and things like that. And there's nothing wrong with actually just speaking to your GP and saying, look, I'm a bit concerned about these things. Can we just, get a blood test or, check things out? And maybe not just run to Google, which I know is a terrifying thing to do sometimes. We're like, oh, here's my symptoms. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Exactly. Yeah.
The world
also speaking to people as well, just to find out if what you're feeling is normal, because that's something I actually ended up asking quite a few people. I have this heavy tiredness, it's like really draining, and all my muscles ache. Is that normal? And I thought maybe it was just my age and everybody else felt that way. It was only through having those conversations that I realized that maybe there was something else going on, it wasn't just that I wasn't coping with life and with work. It was actually something else underlying that. But it took quite a bit of persistence with doctors and consultants to eventually get the diagnosis. I think my POTS diagnosis took about 16 years in the end. So it was a long way. And I had to persuade my cardiologist to properly re-look at my results to make sure, because I by that point had a discussion with a couple of people who thought it could have been that. So I then had to persuade my cardiologist to really consider that. And after about half an hour discussion, he eventually agreed to look at my results again and came back and told me that I was right. So it does take a bit of being your own advocate and pushing sometimes to get those answers.
Yeah. And I know this was what we said we were going to discuss, but actually that's something I would love to. How did you get to that point of confidence? Because I do think a lot of us would go to a GP or a doctor or a cardiac specialist and kind of go, okay, you're the expert, I'll just walk away, even though something inside of you might be like, really feel like there's something more going on. So where did you find that inner strength and trust to kind of go, actually, I need to stand up for myself here?
Yes, well, I think originally I didn't have that confidence. So I had a test probably about 12 years prior to getting diagnosed, which showed that I had that condition. I hadn't heard about it at that time, but they had put something in the test down to something which I knew wasn't true. And I didn't question it. And looking back now, I obviously wish I had. But I think in the end, I was almost desperate for answers. I knew what I'd been diagnosed with wasn't the answer to everything. And having had these chance conversations with people where they had suggested that this might be a possible outcome for me, I did a lot of research on it, and it ticked every single box of the symptoms that I was feeling. So I think that knowledge and the desperation just led me to have the confidence to do that. It was very daunting. I was very much, I've always been had difficulty speaking to doctors and consultants because I felt obviously that they have all the knowledge and I don't. But I don't know, somewhere within me, I knew I needed to have this answer, and I was pretty certain I knew what it was. So it gave me that inner confidence to question them.
Yeah, good for you. And it's a really interesting one, isn't it? Because I think when we do put professionals on these, pedestals, and we kind of go, well, I'm just this layman person, I don't have a doctorate degree and all this kind of thing. But actually, in the world of the information that we do have, sometimes, and I've had it, I have a chronic eye condition, and I have had that now where I've questioned the surgeon. I'm like, well, have you considered this? And then they sort of sit back and go, well, it could be. And then I have this panic of like, well, I got that from Google. Now I'm really terrified. I should not know these things better than you. Or like, why was this not something that came into your awareness? But I think having that inner trust, and I hope for anyone listening that's been like, oh, actually, do you know what? I've had these symptoms that have been bothering me for a while. Trust yourself. I think that level of knowing of like, there's something else here, there's something else wrong, to really sort of fight for yourself and get the answers that you need. I think it's a really valuable message. And for you then, when you got that diagnosis, the several diagnoses, now where you're at now, how has that shifted the way you think about how you run your business? I'm interested in the mindset really of how that sort of affected you, because I suppose sometimes having the answers is great, but equally sometimes we can add meaning to, oh, well, I've got this, so that means, so how did you navigate that?
I think at first I got quite caught up with my diagnosis and spent a lot of time on the internet and bringing myself down. And I do find that still, if I am going through a series of tests or having several meetings with consultants, I can feel myself almost identifying my illness and getting caught up in that. So it takes quite a lot of effort for me to take myself away from that and not see myself as my conditions. And I think just with experience now and knowing what I can achieve, it means that I'm less, it's a separate thing, separate entity to me now. It's something that happens to me, but it doesn't make me who I am. But with my business, I guess when I first started out, I just wanted to do everything. I wanted to push myself. I wanted to prove to myself that I could do this, that I could make my business a success. And that kind of backfired. I ended up making my health worse for a short period of time. And that's kind of why I wanted to start the group, because I knew that wasn't the way to run a business. Mm. So the first year that I was running my skincare business, I wanted to do Christmas fairs. So I managed to launch just before the Christmas fair season. And it involved making lots of products and making up some kits. And there's a lot of repetitive movement with my arms doing that. And I already had a weak shoulder, and that developed into a frozen shoulder. And then the couple of days before the big Christmas fair, the one that I was taking everything to and had so much effort to put into it, I managed to cause bursitis in the other shoulder to the point that I couldn't get myself dressed. I thought I dislocated it. It was absolute agony. And my daughter had to help me put my cardigan around me to around my pajamas so I could go to the hospital and get it checked out. Wow. So I kind of recognised that that wasn't an ideal situation. I did the Christmas fair in the end, completely drugged up on painkillers, can't remember a thing about it. And I vowed to myself that wasn't going to continue. So I then looked at how I could run my business in a way that worked for me and my health and made changes accordingly. And I guess it's a kind of acceptance that I had to get to, because I always had very high ambition that sort of paused when I first had my diagnosis, and then it came back again. And I am still ambitious. I just know that I need to be clever about how I get there, and we'll find a way to work it in a way that doesn't damage my health anymore.
Yeah. And it's that drive. And, your story about the Christmas market, I'm sure the listeners can relate to that in some way, because I think we've all done it, where there's warning signs left, right and centre to be like, you got to slow down, you got to stop. And you're like, no, I've got this thing. And it's just like, even the physical, you're like, okay, my shoulders aren't working, but I'm going to just keep going. And I suppose, as I said, I have an eye condition, but it doesn't really, it does affect my day-to-day life, but not to the point where, energy levels or anything like that. So as a female in business, I'm certainly aware of my energy levels, and they change during the month, and they're different energy levels. And I know when I can really go full on and do a 12-hour day and it doesn't faze me. And I know other days where 2 hours and I'm done. With a chronic illness, how does that sort of show up for you? So are you able to, plan 90 days in advance, like a lot of the people say you should be doing? Or how does that actually work for you on a practical basis when you're looking at scheduling things in and running your business?
The first thing actually I tell my clients is to keep a diary for a period of time, maybe for a month or two, looking at their energy levels. So seeing when in the day they've got the most energy, when they're struggling, when they're better at doing intense work, when they're better at doing more manual jobs, and sort of planning that out and looking at it on a day-to-day basis, like in the morning, in the afternoon, how you're feeling at different times of the day, then looking at it across the week, because some people wake up on a Monday full of energy, whereas other people, it grows as the week goes on. And then finally looking at across the month, especially for women, looking at their cycles and how their energy ebbs and flows, and then using that to plan your work. I think I think you have to have a bit more flexibility when you've got a chronic illness, because some days you just wake up and you haven't planned it, but you just have that energy loss and you just can't do anything. And I think the other thing to consider is knowing that if you're going to be doing something that is tiring, to make sure the day before and the day after you have that buffer where you can get some more energy and not put any pressure on yourself. So if I'm going to be running a workshop that day, I'll make sure that I have a very relaxing day, and the next day I build in some time to make sure that I can recover from that. And it's about understanding your body and understanding how your work can fit into that, and allowing that flexibility, because we can't predict things like migraines and things like that can come out of the blue. So it's trying to understand. I had one client who she'd been working in a full-time job and had to give that up because of her illness, and so she set up her own business. And she sat at her desk every morning at 9 o'clock and was doing the 9 till 5, and she just wasn't getting any work done. And she was getting very upset about that and very stressed. She just felt that she was letting herself down. So we had a little chat about it and discovered that her energy levels were just very, very flat in the morning. And it was about 11 o'clock that she got her energy. And she was also complaining because she wasn't taking any time for herself. She lived close to a river, and the whole reason they'd moved there was to be close to this river so they could go for walks, and she just wasn't going there. So we had a chat about it, and she decided that following the chat that she was going to not work until 11 o'clock. And those first 2 hours were for herself, where she could do things like go and sit by the river with her book and relax without feeling guilty about it, and then start work at 11. So she was ended up working less hours, but in fact, her productivity increased so much that she was getting a lot more work done, and she was able to get more clients. So sometimes just taking that step back and looking at your energy levels can make all the difference, because if you're sat at that desk at 9 o'clock and you've got no energy, by 11 o'clock, you're going to be even more tired. Whereas if you've done something you enjoy and then come back at 11 o'clock to start, you're going to have that energy and feel like you can really start the day properly.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because when we, most of the audience here would have come from some kind of traditional, I don't know, I'm doing bunny ears on a podcast, you can't see me, but in inverted commas, a traditional 9 to 5 route. And we get so conditioned that that's what we need to be doing 8 hours a day. And actually, it's not necessarily. When you run a business, and especially, I suppose, if you have a chronic illness, and it depends, you may only work and I say only, but, only work 4 hours a day. But if you're being super productive and actually you're getting the clients in, you're keeping to commitments and you're doing everything, why do you need to work 8? Like there's no person at the end of the day that's going to go, you did only 4 hours today, shame on you.
Exactly. And if you can do it in less time, then it's much better, isn't it? It's much better for you, your family, and everybody. So it's not about the amount of time. I think we are conditioned. I know a lot of people who work those full days at work, but they spend a lot of that time procrastinating. They're not actually working solidly for those 8 hours. And when it's your own business, you don't have to sit there for 8 hours. You might as well work when you've got that energy and you can produce the most work. I know that some days it can take me all day to do a small task, and yet on another day I can complete that task within half an hour and get a lot more done as well. So it's kind of wasting. If you haven't got that energy, it's kind of wasting your energy even more and your time by sitting there trying to do it when you'd be better off doing it on another day when you've got the right energy.
Yeah. And so for those that might be listening who do have a chronic illness and maybe are thinking of starting a business, or maybe pivoting slightly in the business they have because they've realized maybe with their health it's not the right sort of format, do you find from your experience with your clients and from your own experience that there are maybe just some types of businesses that suit you better? I mean, this may be me not understanding enough about chronic illnesses, because in my head I'm thinking about ME, the real energy zapping ones, the ones which might physically stop you on one day and you'll be okay the next. So are you finding that actually there are certain types of business that suit people better if they're trying to juggle it with a chronic illness or not?
Interesting, actually, in the group, there's a huge range of illnesses and a huge range of businesses as well. So businesses that I know wouldn't work for me are working for other people with different chronic illnesses. And I think it's around looking at your condition and seeing what you can and can't do. So, for example, having something like POTS means standing isn't good for me, and doing anything repetitive. So my first business, making up bottles every day and kits, just isn't that great for me because it pulls on my joints. So I think it's around looking at what does work for your energy levels. I know some people find it very difficult to go on deliver workshops and stand up front. So they that has too much of a sap on their energy levels, but they're fine at writing and doing copywriting and things like that. So it's really about trying to understand your individual condition and looking at it in some granular detail to see what tasks you can do and what tasks you can't do. And then I think it's also worth considering if you can outsource some of those tasks as well. I mean, if you struggle to sit in front of a computer all day, but you're better at delivering, like if you're going visiting schools or something like that and talking to people, maybe that's what works well with your condition. You can then outsource all of the administrative tasks to a VA who can do that for you, while you get on and do what does work for your body. So it's trying to understand that and seeing what you can outsource, what you can avoid doing altogether. And again, also what brings you joy as well, because you want to do a job that makes you happy. You don't want to do tasks that make you feel down, because even if you haven't got a chronic illness, doing tasks that drain your energy just aren't great for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that one. And I think it's really interesting. You said, even with a chronic illness, I was thinking for those, I've spoken a lot about introversion and extroversion. When you have that sort of, as an introvert, I know you were saying if you did something particularly like a workshop, you would make sure you have the day off. I'm exactly the same. I need about 3 days off. If I'm standing up in front of a massive group of people, I'm in my element, but I'm like, nobody talk to me for 2 days because I can't be on constantly. A couple of days I could do, and then I need a bit of downtime. And it takes a while for you to realize, I suppose, that pattern. And I suppose once you're in the business a little bit, you suppose realize, and I suppose the same for you. If you know your energy levels, you're not going to book, clients, calls and things like that at times when you know you're going to be, not at your best. So it is very much about finding that pattern and that rhythm that works for you. And how do you, and I know there's an amazing checklist that we're going to link up in the show notes that people can use, whether they've got a chronic illness or not, just to help them sort of prioritize their health as well. But how do you balance that real core ambition and when you're like, oh my gosh, I just want to drive forward, I just want to make this go? Because I think we all have that. I don't think anyone setting up a business comes from a place of fancy having a business. Like there's something pushing us. You need that push and that drive, otherwise it's never going to get off the ground. How do you balance that, and how do you manage the mindset, I suppose? Because in my mind, I'm thinking that must be so difficult when your mind's like, yeah, I've got this amazing idea and I want to run with it at 1,000,000 miles an hour. And you have to, even if you're feeling well at the time, you have to rein it back to a point. Is that accurate, or, is that how you find things?
I think at first I did, but I've now come to change my mindset to know that in order to be successful in my business, I have to be healthy. And so I now focus on my health first, because I know that if I push myself too hard, then my health is going to suffer and my business is going to suffer. So I can now focus on my health first and my business second. So even when it comes to planning, again, this is something that one of my bits of advice that I give people, I put in when I sit down to do my diary for the week or the month, the first things that I put in are things for me. So the exercise that I need to do, getting out in fresh air, the food that I need to sit down and eat, and then taking breaks. So for example, at lunchtime, I'll have my lunch and then I'll either go for a walk or sit in the garden, or if I'm feeling a bit lacking in energy, I'll go and lie down for half an hour. And that is non-negotiable. That hour is sacred for me. And a lot of people will work through their lunch hours, but for me, I know that if I don't have that hour and where I can get some rest, then the rest of the afternoon is going to be non-productive. So I plan all of those things in first. If I have physio appointments, or as I say, just even something for me like reading my book for half an hour, I put it into my diary before I plan anything else for the week. And I think putting that first can really make a big difference, because you've still got enough time to do all your work. I think often your work takes as long as you give it. So if you give it a smaller amount of time, you can get it done in a lot quicker. So
Yes.
that definitely applies to me. So that's how I tend to work. And I think the other thing I try and do is find little moments of joy in the day, because that keeps my spirits up. And then if my spirits are up, my work is going to be a lot better quality. So
yeah, I completely, and I definitely think you're spot on with that. Things can take as long as we give them. It's Parkinson's law, I think, isn't it? It will take as long as we decide it's going to take. So, especially in the online space, if you're going to write a blog, or if you're going to do a video or something, I say the same things to my clients. I'm like, give yourself half an hour, just get it done. Because if when you have your own business, we haven't got anyone giving us deadlines. We have to be very disciplined in giving ourselves our own deadlines. And you're absolutely right, that can really help. And I suppose what's really interesting, I'm just thinking, my little masculine brain of the data is kicking off. Actually, I wonder how many people listening, if they were really tracking their productivity, really tracking their data, their results, if actually working longer hours and push all the time was getting them many better results than actually if they did exactly what you just said and just made sure that they had some non-negotiable self-care time, whether actually the results would be the same or even better without that.
I find personally my results are better since I've started working in this way, because I could, as you say, a blog could take me a couple of days before, whereas now I can get one out very, very quickly. And I just don't feel so overwhelmed by it either. I think because I know that I've got this time for myself. I don't feel overwhelmed by my to-do list, because I've spent quite a lot of time working on that and working on a methodology that works for me. So I don't have this feeling of, oh my God, I'm drowning under all this work. I can't take time for myself. So working on that prioritization and productivity has really helped me feel confident that I can take this time for myself and keep my health well.
Absolutely. So to sort of, before we sort of let people know about your membership and the other things that they can find out about you, which are all going to be linked up in the show notes, what are sort of, if you could, if someone listening to this is like, oh my God, I'm really struggling with a chronic illness, and maybe they had that belief of, I can't take this business where I want it to go because I've got this condition, what are maybe the first sort of 2 or 3 things you would say to them to help them get themselves into a space where they know they can achieve it, but sort of helping them to figure out the way that will work for them?
I think the first thing to do is to look at your goal and take it backwards and work out exactly what you need to do to get there. And then when you're planning that, work it around your health requirements as well. So making sure that you have got that time for yourself and that you're not pushing yourself. And if you still feel that you can't do it in that time scale, then at that point it might be worth looking at if there are things that you can outsource and that you can concentrate on doing the tasks that will really get you to your goal. Because I think often when you're running a business, there are so many tasks that you can be working on, and they're not all the same importance. So trying to work out which ones are the most important and which ones don't matter so much is really important. Because I think we get into the grind of having to do things every day because everybody else is. And I know for me, that's had to slip. I can't be perfect in all areas. So certain areas I allow to slip, and I don't feel guilty about it. And I focus on the ones that are going to get me closer to my goal. So first thing is to understand your goal and what is important and what isn't, and to try and make sure that you're not overwhelming yourself. And asking for help as well. I think it's very difficult for anybody, but I think especially when you've got a chronic illness, you don't want to admit that you might be struggling. So asking for help can be very difficult, or even speaking to other people in a similar situation and seeing how they are dealing with something. And that's why I set up the group, because I really wanted to create that atmosphere of you can ask anything and people will explain. There's people who've had businesses for 20, 30 years in the group, and there's people who are just starting out. So having that atmosphere where people have been there and done that and know exactly how you're feeling can really help as well. And then I think another thing is to look at productivity, because what you don't want to do is be sitting at your desk for hours. That is completely counterproductive. So if you've got a chronic illness, you want to spend the least amount of time as possible sat at your desk. So trying to find ways that work for you, whether it be time blocking or working with a timer. So you're only doing a 25-minute block here, having a break, and then another 25-minute block. That can really help as well. So trying to really master that productivity so that you get as much done in as little time as possible. Because what you really want to focus on is having that rest and having that time to do the activities that really help your body to recover.
I think that's so key. And I honestly think all 3 of those are valuable, whether you have a chronic illness or not really. I think when you run a business, that the one thing that you did say, which I just absolutely think everyone needs to dive onto, is you need to focus on the tasks that are going to move you closer to your goal. I think you're absolutely right that we can get so caught up in we must post on social media at this time of the week, we must do this, we must do a Facebook Live, we must do this, and we must blog, and we must, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, all these musts, are they actually, if you look at the data, I love a bit of data, if you actually look at the data, what's bringing money into the business, what's actually moving you closer to that goal? And if it's, if posting 4 times on Instagram is making diddly squat difference to your business, then stop doing it for a bit and see if there's something you can put your energy into that's going to work better for you. I think that's really, really valuable. And also that time blocking. Again, I think productivity is a funny one. That used to be my thing. I used to be the productivity girl, and I moved away from the sort of typical masculine productivity world, because I found for women, it didn't necessarily work as well, because we do have cycles, and what we can do one week might not be the same as the next week. And very much so for your clients, what they can do one day, they might not be able to do the next day. And I think blocking in those non-negotiables, so time at the gym, and I know, I hope you don't mind me sharing, but we were like, oh, hang on, let's do Friday. Oh no, it needs to be after this time, because we both got the gym in the morning. That is a non-negotiable.
Exactly.
So, I loved that we were on the same wavelength. We're like, actually, yes, I will work hard, and we will work hard at our business, and it requires effort. But there are certain things that are non-negotiable, and that is our health, our fitness, our well-being. So when they're scheduled in, it's so much easier, because that if someone says, can I have a meeting on a Monday morning? And that you've got Pilates that day, and you can go, I can't do Monday morning, but I can do Monday afternoon, or I can do Tuesday, or this is the days that I see clients. It's so much easier, less brain fog for you to be like, oh, actually, let's fit things around. And it just works so much better.
Yeah, I think once you've got into that mindset of prioritizing it, everything else falls into place around it. And people don't mind you saying, I can't do it today, but I can do it later. That people are generally quite flexible with that. And it's giving yourself permission to allow that to happen, and to put yourself first. And I think a lot of us, especially women, I think we tend to put everybody else first and ourselves last. And I think it's really important to start turning that on its head and putting yourself first. And it doesn't mean that you're caring less about your business or about anybody else around you, because in fact, you can actually do a better job of looking after everybody else and your business when you put yourself first. Yeah. And it's trying to get that mindset switch, because you're worth it. You're worth putting that effort into and keeping yourself well, because even if you are healthy now, you don't know what the long term holds for you. Mm-hmm. So if you can start putting those foundations in place now to look after your health, in the long term, your business, your family, and everybody around you will also benefit.
Yeah. And I absolutely agree with that so much, because I think there's a big piece around boundaries, and I've seen it in my male clients, but I see it in every single female client I've ever worked with, because we, as you said, we are people pleasers, we are nurturers, we are very conditioned and just innately lovely people, and we want to help people, and we want to be available. And when we take that into business, that can result in us not having very strong boundaries. So we end up going, oh yeah, fine, I'll do a coaching call at 8:00 at night, or oh, okay, I'll do this, even when inside we're like, oh, that's really not going to work for me, and I'm gonna have to do this, and I have to rush around. And I now have very strict, when people want calls with me, there's 2 days that you can book in my diary, and that's it. And if we need to do another day, it has to be negotiated on my terms, and it just works so much better. And it's not an evil, mean thing to do, to say, actually, no, these are my boundaries. This is when you can contact me, this is when you can't. And actually, it makes business flow so much easier, because something you touched on about time blocking is context switching is just the worst thing for productivity. Because if you're having a day where you're doing calls, and then you're doing content creation, then you're doing something else, your brain can't function properly, because it's not in that nice flow state of, yay, I'm in creation mode, or yay, I'm in client serving mode, because we're trying to switch from that different part of us all the time. So yeah, really, really great tips. So good.
Great point, actually, because your clients are actually going to benefit if they stick to your boundaries. Then they're going to get the best of you as well. So that is a good way of looking at it. It's not just you benefiting, your clients is going to benefit as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, we do teach people how to treat us by, whether if we have I always say, we have floppy boundaries, people are just going to keep pushing them, and then like there's just no boundary at all, and you're like, oh, okay. And then that drains us. It shows people that actually we're not going to stick to our boundaries. And it causes a discontent in both parties. So yeah, it's really, really important. So those tips have been amazing. And I hope it's given some hope to those that have got chronic illness, especially maybe if there's anyone listening that's just been diagnosed. A client I worked with had horrendous chronic fatigue, and it lasted, I think, a good 2-3 years. And I saw her the other day at an event, and she was like, I'm better. I'm better. And it's like, it's to see her well was just like the best thing in the world. And she runs her business now in a way that works for her. But I remember the struggle. And that's why I was curious about, managing that sort of ambitious drive, is that I saw her struggle of knowing that she wanted to do so much, but her body was just like, nope, not happening. So I do hope it gives people listening some hope that actually there are ways forward. You can have a business. There is no limitation just because you do have an illness. It is possible if that's what you truly desire. It's just about working with someone like yourself, or knowing that there's just different ways. It's not necessarily the work 70 hours, hustle until your eyes bleed mentality that's going to get you there.
Exactly. Definitely. And I think when you're starting a business, it feels like you've got so much to do. But if you plan it out, you can see that just those baby steps just move you forward. And in a reasonably short amount of time, you can achieve so much if you don't try and do it all at once. It really is taking those baby steps every day, and when you're well enough to, and getting there in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazing. It's been such a joy. So tell me, where can everyone find the checklist? Because I know the amazing checklist you've created for people. Also, you've got a free Facebook group, and you mentioned a membership as well.
That's right. So you can get my free business self-care checklist on bit.ly/EATO self-care. And that's spelled EATO self-care. And that you can download that for free. And the free Facebook group is called Entrepreneurs Against the Odds, and that's on Facebook. And my website is excelagainsttheodds.co.uk. And then I've recently launched a membership called the Excel Against the Odds Success Academy, which includes workshops, quarterly planning sessions. And again, you can find that on my website, which is excelagainsttheodds.co.uk.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And I love that it's called the Excel Against the Odds, because I think that really epitomizes for me entrepreneurship. I think business owners, that's why I love this world so much, that the people that go into this, we're not normal. Like it's kind of crazy pants to kind of go, do you know what? I'm going to start this business and I'm going to go against the mold and I'm going to carve my own path. When we're in this world, we think that's quite normal, but it's not. It really is about excelling against the odds, especially for your audience. And it is about having that trust and self-belief in yourself to know that you can do this. It may not be the way all these gurus are telling you to do it. It might be the fact that actually you need to find your own way of doing it. So I highly encourage anyone who is it just for women, my love, or is it for any gender?
That's for anybody.
Anyone? Amazing. So anyone that's sort of suffering with a chronic illness and knows deep down that they can make this work, they just need to find out how. I highly recommend joining the group, because Sarah's amazing and very inspirational, and kind of makes you think, those days when I'm feeling a bit tired, like it's not that bad. There are people creating incredible businesses dealing with a lot worse. So it's really inspirational.
Anybody creating a business is doing a brilliant job.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, over the last 2 years, anyone that still has a business, like, hat tip to all of us. Like we're still here, we're still standing, and fingers crossed. Obviously, people might listen to this at any point in the future, but 2022 has started. It feels lighter. There seems to be light at the end of the tunnel. So fingers crossed, we'll all be thriving a bit more rather than maybe surviving, which has been the case for a lot of people over the last couple of years. But Sarah, thank you so much. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
It's been lovely talking to you.
Thank you so much. And remember, all the things that she mentioned, all the links are in the show notes. When this gets shared on socials, the links will be in there as well. So thank you very much, my lovely. I look forward to speaking to you again.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you for joining me today. And remember, any resources and links mentioned in this episode can be found in the show notes. If you're enjoying this podcast, I would be so grateful if you would kindly share, subscribe, and leave a positive review so that the podcast can help and reach as many people as possible. Thank you again for listening. Have a gorgeous day, and I'll see you in the next episode.